In this video I'm going to show you how to create this Dragon Quest style turn-based combat system. You can attack, enemy can attack, you can do other actions like defend or run away, and you can defeat enemies as well. So we'll start by creating a new scene as a control, call this battle, and save it. I'm going to give it a texture rect for the background. I'll include all these assets in the description. And then we'll give it another texture rect for the enemy and center it. Okay, I'm going to call this enemy. Now if we run this scene, you can see we've got the enemy in the center. So let's go ahead and get the health bar first. So the health bar is going to hover above the enemy. So I'm going to create a VBox container so that the health bar and the enemy could be vertically aligned. Create a progress bar, move it above, and here's our VBox. I'm going to go ahead and make it a little smaller and then center it, come to the enemy, keep centered, and then for the progress bar, I guess that is a fine width for now. I'll just make this as small as possible and center it. Okay, I'm going to call this enemy container, and then I'm going to style this progress bar. Come to theme overrides, style. For the foreground, I'm going to give it a green color, and in order to see this, I'm going to give it a value of, let's say, 50, and remove the %. And then for the background, we'll give it another style box flat, give it a red color, and give it a minimum Y of 16 so that we can see it. And then I'm also going to give this a black border width of 1, and since you don't see it above the foreground, come to the expand margin, give it 1 everywhere, and there you go. Now if we run this, you can see progress bar. And then let's get the text of the progress inside. So I'm going to give it a child label, give it the full rect, center it, and we'll say HP colon 25 out of 50, and then give it a pixel font. So come to theme overrides, font, new dynamic font data, and then click into whatever font you want to use. In this case, I'm using a NES style font. And if you don't see anything at first, just toggle a value. And I'm going to save this as the font called NES. And it's a little off center, so you can come to extra spacing and change some stuff around over here. That should be fine. Okay, and then I'm also going to give it a color shadow and maybe 1 space at the bottom, 2 spaces at the bottom. Okay, so now if we run this, there we go, HP 25 out of 50. Okay, and then I'll also go ahead and do the player's health at the bottom. So if we click add child, I'm going to give it a panel, bottom wide, raise it up a bit, let's say to 32. I'm going to call this the player panel. I'm going to give it a style box flat, give it a black color but give it some alpha, and that's going to hover above as the heads up display. Then I'm going to give it a HBox container because it's going to have the player name and then the player's health on the other side, and we'll just call this player data, center it, and another child, give it a label. I'm going to call this, we'll just say player for now. And then for the font, let's drag in the NES font and give it the health bar. So since we already have this nice health bar that we created for the enemy, let's just copy that and paste it into the player data. And since it has no width, come to size flags and just expand it. And maybe vertically, we'll just center it. And I'm going to give this some margin on the left and on the right so that it's not hugging the walls. And so there's the player's health bar, and then let's also make the label expand so it pushes it to the center, and then we'll just center that as well. Okay, so here's the player's health and the enemy's health. Cool. So Now let's do the kind of the actions at the top. So it's going to be a similar panel to this. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this panel. I'm going to call this the actions panel. Layout is going to be centered on the top, and I'm going to just delete the child there and give it a new HBox container. Full rect. This is going to have 3 buttons in it. Center. I'm going to call this actions, and we're going to start with a button. And I'm going to call this, we're going to start with the run action. Come over to fonts, give it the NES font, and let's give it some styling. So style box, make it black, and size flags, we'll expand it for now. And for the hover and the pressed, we'll give it a white color, and we'll drag that over to press so that they're same. And then the colors, we're going to make the font white on normal, and then we'll make it black for hover and pressed. And then we won't allow any focusing. So here's the button. So you hover over it, looks like that. You can also make the mouse the pointing hand, looks like that. Okay, so that's our first action. We're going to have 3 actions. So let's duplicate this. So we've got attack, which is going to be the first one. Attack. And also let's give this a border. So let's give it a white border with 1. Okay. This is going to be defend. And then we have run over here, which is just run. Okay. And then, so it doesn't hug the wall, we're going to give the HBox container some margin. And we'll also give it a separation of 6 between each button for consistency. Okay, so now we've got attack, defend, run, and we've got all our kind of UI set up in place to go ahead and start programming this thing. So let's start, oh, actually there's one other thing, which is the text box. So if you'll notice in the final product, there's a text box that kind of drives most of the logic and most of the actions. So let's just make that text box super quick. So we'll create a panel, call it text box. We'll do top wide, we'll drag it down till it's, let's say, 54, and we'll give it, of course, a new panel, make it black, give it a border, white border, and then we don't want it hugging the walls, so we'll give it, let's say, 8. Oops, except for there. We'll give it 8 margin on each side. And then we'll give it a label for its actual text. Go full rect, so text goes here, or let's say a dragon appears. We want this to have margin as well. I'll give it 8, 8, minus 8, minus 8 all around. And I'll also give it a font, and just for fun I'm going to give it a different font. It's going to be Adventurer. Okay, dragon appears, so here's our text box. Cool. So we have a text box and the text box label. I'm also going to give it I'm calling it a ticker, which is basically just the sign that we can close this text box. Most text boxes have something like that. Okay. Alright, so let's give it a script, battle.gd. So first things first, we want to hide the text box. So let's go ahead and make our ready function, and we're just going to say textbox.hide. Okay, so we call this textbox is hidden. We also probably want to hide the actions until we're ready to do something about, until it's our turn essentially. So we'll hide the actions as well. So it looks like this. So we have a clean start. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some text that says, a wild enemy appears or whatnot. So to program that, let's create a function called display text where we show the text box, and we also set the text box's label text to whatever text we want to show, and we'll call display text a wild enemy appears. Okay, and now we need to be able to close the text box. So let's check for input. Input. So if input.isAction just press, so if we press UI accept, which in this case is going to be enter or space, we'll also do or if we press the mouse button left, then we want to hide the text box. We also want to make sure that the text box is visible as well. So we press accept or button left and the text box is visible, then go ahead and close the text box. Okay, now we can close the text box. Cool. So we need a way after this text box disappears to then show the player's possible actions. So how do we know when the text box disappears? So there's a little trick. If we create a signal called text box closed, anytime we close the text box, we can emit this signal, text box closed. And then after we open the text box, we can wait for the text box closed to happen. Text box closed. And after we close the text box, then let's show the actions panel. Okay, great. So now we have a way to halt execution until text box closes, which is going to be useful for furthering other actions as we build this out. Okay, so first thing we want to do is run, because that's the easiest. We click run, a text box shows, says you escaped safely or whatnot, and then we'll just exit the game. So let's head over to run. I'm just going to hide this text box. We're going to head over to run, and we're going to connect its signal. So if run is pressed, we want to be able to say some text. So we're going to copy this, and we're going to say got away safely. And then we yield until the text box closes, and then we'll just exit the game. So let's try that out. Wild enemy appears. We run away, got away safely, game closes. And just so it doesn't close right away, we can also just set a little timer before, let's say for 5.5 seconds, and then we'll close the game. So this might be a little bit nicer. We'll do 0.25. Okay, so we have, text, we can close it, we have some actions, we can do a little bit of logic. Let's actually have these health bars mean something, because that's going to be important once we start doing attack and defend. So first things first, the player's health. We'll do the player health and then we'll do the enemy health. So for the player's health, you want the player health to persist throughout your game, so you generally want a way to maintain it globally. So let's go ahead and create a script, and we're going to call it, right click, new script, we're going to call this state. And we're going to come in here and we're going to do var current health equals 25, or we'll say 35, and then max health equals 35, and then we'll do the player's damage, how much damage they do, and we're going to set that to 20. And then we're going to come to the project settings, and we're going to auto load this state script, and we're going to use that in order to inform what the starting health is going to look like. So how do we set the health bar value and all that? We'll do that next. So we're going to create a function called setHealth, and this is going to be taking a health variable, and that's going to be set to set the health bar. So we also, besides the current health, we also need the max health, and then we also, because we're using the enemy's health bar and the player's health bar, let's also pass the progress bar node so that we can reuse the same function for both the enemy's health and the player's health. So we're going to pass the progress bar node. So the progress bar node has max value and value. So for example, if the max value is 50 and the current value is 25, it would look like this. And of course we have to set the label to reflect whatever value it is that we set. So we're going to say progress bar.value equals health, progress bar dot max value equals max health, and then we want to grab the label that's a child of the progress bar and set it to HP colon and the health. So we'll say progress bar dot get node label dot text equals HP colon %D over %D, and we're going to fill it in with decimal values of health and max health. And then we're going to do this at the start so that the health values are set correctly. So we're going to say set health player progress bar, and we're going to do state dot current health and state dot max health, which is from that script. So now if we run this, we see HP is 35 over 35. I'm going to put a little space there. Run it one more time. HP is 35 over 35, and now let's do the enemy's data. So the player's data is maintained in this global state, but the enemy's data, we want to be able to store the enemy data for different kinds of enemies in an efficient way. So resources are a great place for that. So we're going to go ahead and create a base resource for any type of enemy, and then we're going to populate it with this particular enemy. So we're going to start with a new script, and we're going to call it base enemy, and it inherits from resource. So what does it mean to be an enemy? So we're going to say we're going to export string var name, the name of the enemy. We're going to say export texture, so the sprite more or less of the enemy. We're going to have the enemy's health, and we're going to have the enemy's how much damage it does, and these are just default values. And then we're going to create a new resource called dragon to represent this particular enemy that we want to face, and we're going to drag base enemy here. I'm going to call this dragon. We're going to give it this sprite, and we're going to give it, let's say, 45 health, and it does 15 damage. And then in our battle class here, we're going to expose a enemy resource that we're going to populate with the enemy that we want to face, which in this case is dragon. So in the ready function, we can now call set health on the enemy's progress bar, enemy progress bar, and we can give it the enemy's health as the starting health and the enemy's health as the max health. So let's see if this works. Okay, so now we've got 45, 45, and I'm at 35, 35. And just because the enemy sprite might be different, let's say it was set to baddie, but we're not facing baddie, we need to make sure that we set the texture as well. So we're going to say enemy.texture equals enemy.texture. Of course, enemy is the resource that we created right here. So we have the health, damage, texture, and name. And instead of a wild enemy appears, we can now say a wild whatever the enemy's name is appears. So now we have a wild dragon appears. And we'll just do to upper. So it's uppercase. A wild dragon appears. Cool. So you can attack, defend, or run. So now it's finally time to attack, or to implement attack. So for the healths, for the player health and for the enemy's health, let's actually just use some local variables for that. So we'll have current player health and current enemy health, and we'll go ahead and initialize these. So the current player's health is going to start at state.current health, and the current enemy's health is going to start at enemy.health. And we're going to use these local variables to track the health over time throughout the battle. And let's just set this back to the dragon. Okay, cool. Alright, so let's do attack. So we come over to pressed, connect the signal. So what happens when we attack? So first we display some text. We say, you swing your piercing sword, right? And then the enemy gets hurt. So the enemy's health goes down by however much damage you do. And we want to make sure this doesn't go into the negatives, so you could do, instead of minus equals, you can do equals max of 0 and current enemy health minus state.damage. Okay, so the enemy's health goes down by however much damage that you did, and we want to be able to update the enemy's health bar, so we're going to say the enemy's progress bar is going to go down. We're going to set the health to be the new health. Cool. So we attack the enemy, we do some damage. We also want to have an animation. So if we show this, you swing your piercing sword, but we also want to show that we did some damage. So let's create a little animation for that. So let's create an animation player. Let's create a new animation called enemy damaged, and we'll go ahead and grab the enemy's modulate, and we'll just set it to 0, and then a couple times. Let's duplicate that. Maybe something like that, and we'll just make it cubic. Okay, so the enemy gets damaged. That's what the animation looks like. Okay, so we'll run that animation, enemy damaged, and then we'll halt execution until that animation finishes. Animation finished. And then, so you swing your piercing sword, we do some math, we do an animation, we wait for that animation to finish, and then it's the enemy's turn. But let's take a look at what that looks like. So we attack, you swing your piercing sword. Now it's the enemy's turn. So now I'm going to call a function called enemy turn. And we're going to define that function as the enemy attacking us. Enemy's turn. So it's going to look a lot like this. So I'm just going to copy this. So, oh, there's actually one more thing. We could also do a display text for how much damage you did. You could say you dealt %s, %d damage, and then mod by state.damage, and I'll just show you what that looks like real quick. Attack, you swing your piercing sword, you dealt 20 damage. Okay, now it's the enemy's turn. So the enemy is going to say, we'll give to the enemy's name, so dragon launches at you fiercely, or whatnot. And then enemy.name. So the enemy attacking you is going to look very similar. You're going to lose some health, so the current player health is going to go down by the enemy's damage. And then the player's progress bar, which is going to be this guy, is going to be set to current player's health and then the state.max health. And then we could say that the enemy did a certain amount of damage. So enemy, we'll do the enemy by its name. So we'll say enemy.name dealt enemy.damage damage, and then we can have an animation for that, so for the player getting hurt. So come back to the animation player, and we'll do like a kind of a screen shake kind of deal. Create a camera 2D, and we'll do current, and basically this is like a fake screen shake. We're gonna just move it around to random positions and record the frames. Of course, there's more complicated ways to do screen shake, but this is a very cheap way that I think is fine for a tutorial. So it looks like this. Camera's gonna move around like that. So we're gonna say shake, and let's see what this looks like. So while dragon appears, attack. You swing your piercing sword. You dealt 20 damage. Dragon lunges at you fiercely. Dragon dealt 15 damage. So one problem with the shaking right, first of all, this needs to go back to 0, is that when the screen shakes, you see the gray background around the edges. Now it's not a huge deal, but I've got just a larger background here, which you may want to consider if you're going to be shaking the screen like that. So just make sure it covers around the edges, and then you shouldn't see the gray background. Cool. All right, so I mean, we have the back and forth. Player can attack the enemy can attack us. We have run. Defend is fairly straightforward. I'll do it just briefly. So if we're defending, we're going to have a variable for that. We'll go ahead and connect signal for defending. We'll say if we press defending is true. We'll have some flavor text. We'll say, you know, you prepare defensively. And then instead of an animation, we'll just pause for 0.25 seconds, and then we'll still go to the enemy's turn. And then on the enemy's turn, if we're defending, first off, we got to set this back to false. We'll do like I guess like a mini shake. So we'll duplicate this animation, we'll rename it mini shake. So we're still going to shake the screen a little bit, but it's just going to be much lighter. So instead of 8, we'll just do 2, 2, minus 2, 2, minus 1, minus 2. You know, basically like very small numbers. So it's just going to be like a tiny shake. Okay, mini shake. So we're going to call mini shake for the defending animation. Else we do the regular one. And we're going to say you defended successfully. Okay. And then it should go back to the player's turn. Well, we have to show the actions panel actually. Okay. While dragon appears, attack. You swing, you deal 20 damage, dragon launches at you, dragon deal 15 damage. Defend. Actually, we should be hiding the actions panel when there's text on the screen. So let's do that real quick. We'll hide this. Okay, attack, you swing fiercely. Okay, defend, you prepare defensively, you defended successfully. Okay. Final thing is actually what happens when someone dies. So I'm going to set my damage to 30 so I can kill the dragon faster. And what happens when the player dies? Okay, or the enemy dies. So we'll just do enemy dies, and you can figure out player dies because it's going to be pretty similar. So when we attack the enemy, before we go to the enemy's turn, let's check if the enemy's health reaches 0. If it does, we'll display some text. We'll say, you know, the enemy by its name was defeated. Enemy.name. Enemy was defeated. Play a little animation called enemy died. We'll make it a whole second, make it really dramatic. Modulate, and we'll fade it like that. Okay. Cool. So enemy was defeated. Then we call AnimationPlayer.play enemy died. We'll go ahead and yield until the animation finishes, and then we'll do a short second, and then we'll close the screen. Okay, see what that looks like. Attack, deal 30 damage, dragon was defeated. and the game closes. Alright, so that is basically it. There's one last thing, which is, if we plug a different enemy, will it also work? So let's go ahead and just duplicate the dragon resource and create a baddie, and we'll call it baddie, and we'll give him 35 health and 5 damage. And we're still on dragon, but we need to drag the baddie resource here, and we run this scene, and now it's a baddie. Wild baddie appears. Awesome. Okay. Well, I hope that was helpful. Thanks for sticking through it. And yeah, best of luck. I'll include all the assets in the description. Thanks for watching.